Can we all stand and say pledge allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Do we have any public comment?
No.
Public. Okay. Committee reports. We will start with admin and finance.
We approved the budget, so I make a motion to approve the advertised proposed 2017 budget as presented at the December 5th, 2016 regular Borough Council meeting, following the mandatory public inspection period.
Second.
Any questions about the budget? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Where do we have this at? Draft fee schedule. Okay, on the draft fee schedule, I made up some numbers, and then Mike said that, for this portion right here, that there may be some FEMA rates that we might, how do we, handle filling that in? Should we use FEMA rates or?
Let me get my head around what we're even looking at here. Where did all this come from?
This is, for property maintenance.
What was done at the last meeting, council expressed interest in tweaking their zoning permit fees.
Not all the county.
Not all council did. So, but maybe you should consider it though.
Oh, I've got some comments on that, we get to.
We'll get to that point. So, the yellow highlights are the areas that have been changed from the previous fee schedule. Under zoning permits, the costs that are there reflect exactly what we are charged as a borough from our code enforcement people to enforce zoning. If you look on the last page, there's a green highlight, and that's the fee schedule that was in there previously. I will point out that when you go above a $19,000 project, the fee will be lower. Anything above $19,000 in project costs going, if we adopt this, the cost of that permit fee will be lower than what it was under the current fee schedule. So I point that out. There was not previously a fee adopted for a written zoning opinion. There was not previously an on-site consultation fee. Those come straight from the fee schedule that you approved for code enforcement last month. All the white and black stayed the same. You come down to the second page, there's a little $4 that is highlighted. That is the correct number. The $40 that was there in the previous was an incorrect number. So that number has been corrected. You will notice if you compare to the previous fee schedule under commercial inspections that there was an area for fire suppression. That has been eliminated. Those fees now just go under the project costs for commercial construction. The yellow highlights on about page 3, really those numbers for all intent and purpose appear to be the same as what they were in the previous fee schedule. They're just spread out in a different fashion. The plan review and inspections were combined with a similar percentage of costs under the previous fee schedule. They're now separated out. Under miscellaneous fees, in putting this together for you, because I had a question of code administrators, I didn't realize that they had removed the fees for fire suppression. I asked the question of them, did you intend to do that or was that an oversight? In the process of getting the correct answer for that, I had a conversation with your zoning officer. We were having a conversation about a property in the borough that has some unsecured doors, and he said, by the way, he said, if you ask your public works employees to board up those doors, do you have a fee in place on your fee schedule for that? And I said, I will look at that. And he said, the previous municipality he worked at, Penn Township in Lancaster County, he said, we had a fee schedule for X, Y, and Z. So, all that to say this, I know earlier in the year there was a discussion about the possibility of cutting overgrown lots. Well, you see, you have a mower and an operator, you have a line trimmer, chainsaw, and an operator. In the event that things really get crazy, you have single axle dump truck and driver. You know, some things that could happen in the event of an emergency situation, a fire, something lands in the street, you have to push it back. If you were to wish to recover those fees, or costs, which you can, you really should consider having a fee schedule for those adopted.
And that does happen, yeah. Some buildings are structurally after a fire, need to have a backhoe come in and knock them down so that
Right.
we can get to the hot spots and stuff.
And those type of things, as Mike asked the question last month, emergency response services, how do we collect that $150 an hour of service? Well, the way we do that, state law, I believe, if I'm correct, stand to be corrected, state law says if you incur those sort of responses, or those sort of costs, and then you need to, let's say it's a fire damaged building, well, obviously to repair that fire damaged building, they're going to have to apply for permitting and inspections to do that. Before you issue that permit, you have the ability to collect your costs that were incurred in responding to the emergency up to that point. So, it would be best if you had those costs, adopted in a fee schedule. I didn't know what you wanted to put under the miscellaneous fees per hour. I think that probably needs a little bit of thought between now and the beginning of January, if you decide you would like to do that. So I left it blank. I've heard some really good thought process so far.
Do we need to break them out that far? Because, I mean, you know, you have per hour there, but would it be per man hour? Because what if Mike's up there and he has to have a helper? That's two guys.
Well, then in that case, you would have two laborers.
Yeah.
You have borough public employees, labor, you'd have times two, each one. If you have one of those, let's say you would have,
I just worry that by breaking them out into individual things, we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into limiting, because you don't know what you're gonna get into in these situations.
again, I see Keith nodding his head, it's food for thought, however you,
What does our esteemed attorney think of where those fees can go down the rabbit hole?
And Mike had mentioned using the FEMA rate schedule for those kind of items.
You know, I don't know that that's a legal issue, how you guys break it out. And what rates you adopt, they just have to be reasonable, and they have to be tied to the actual cost the borough incurs. You can't make a profit off of any of this stuff, so you need to be made whole by the offending party and not make any money on it. So,
It just seems hard to kind of quantify that without
Well,
actually.
see, what I did was I took like $25 for the employees, $2.25 for using the backhoe an hour, which I think is probably still half the price of what it would cost if you went and rented one. And
And this would only come into effect if in the event of some sort of emergency.
well, sometimes things pop up that are really bizarre and we didn't expect them, but can I foresee a possibility of needing a dump truck to take care of a private issue? Possibly, in an emergency situation. A skid loader, backhoe, possibly. We've already had abandoned lots and so forth that grew up to the point that, yeah, the skid loader and dump trucks
you
came
had to
into
have a
play.
skid loader to go in there and start working.
Yeah, what triggered this was, there is a property in the borough that I'm concerned about the doors being secured, and if our property maintenance officer gets to the point where he orders the doors closed, the only way we're gonna close those doors is gonna be Mike and Eliseo working out how that goes about. Well, then, we need to be able to recover that cost. I can foresee a situation whereby, you know, a fire, and we have a bunch of debris in the street, push it back, you know, or scoop it up and get it out of your backhoe, dump truck, skid loader. I can see that.
Well, we also had, when the big concrete truck rolled over there in
Yes, we
front of
did.
the street, we were using our equipment for that, and then realized it's not big enough, and then quarry brought their stuff that's even bigger yet to pick those big chunks of concrete up, and nobody ever got paid for that, but they could have.
I didn't figure that any of this was you know, the final word. It's here for discussion, and I thought maybe these would be something that you might even need to have some people work on between now and the January meeting, before you bring it
And
back.
I do know that we have kept records of places that have been cleaned up and we've never, ever got paid because we didn't have it documented.
I think if you're going to, if your ultimate goal is at some point in time to either bill a property owner or lien a property or withhold a permit until monies owed are recovered from the permittee, then yes, you need to have a fee schedule adopted that addresses those items, which I think is what you're trying to do here. Certainly, if there's gonna be a dispute by the obligor, person owing the money, you're in a much better position to be successful in recovering it if you can show we have this neutral fee schedule that we adopted that we're abiding by, and that's all we're looking to recover.
So
That's what Harry brought up, and that's what I, you know.
if
that's
we
what I
adopt
brought up.
this right now though, do we have to,
Yeah,
We're not adopting it right now.
Oh.
It'll be for next year,
Yeah.
for
first
next
meeting,
year? Okay.
the third.
That was my intention, to kind of bring this to you, to let you do what you're doing, and the thought would be that the January meeting would be, you know, maybe that would be when you're ready to adopt, maybe it won't be.
We just don't hold out any illusions that if you have an overturned cement truck on 462 and you scramble to help them do all these things, that you're gonna get the concrete operator to write you a check. Your only chances of recovering those kind of costs are when you have a piece of real estate that you can hold a permit hostage or like the transient guy going through town who dumps his corn load on the
Well, no,
street.
this was a 70 ton piece of concrete that was laying in the street.
With a piece of bridge, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a,
We can keep the piece of
those
bridge.
big long pieces of bridge.
But again, that would be a situation whereby John is pointing out, and I think it would be exactly the kind of situation John's pointing out, where don't go up there figuring that the borough's gonna get involved in it, that you're gonna recover your costs, because now you're into insurances and all the other stuff, and no, you're probably not going to, as the fire company cannot, we cannot also.
Alright, so if, we can work on getting the FEMA schedule, see what those numbers are by next month.
Maybe a little bit of research into exactly what rental fees do look like for some of those.
And also the mileage.
Says-
It's the borough secretary number, doesn't it?
Yeah, what's Tammy's plot too?
Are you
I
talking
was
about
wondering that too.
53.5.
Yeah, that cost.
I wouldn't think so.
So,
You guys that are in the trades, isn't there a state agency or database that publishes the going rates for backhoe and operator? How does, I mean,
That would
John's
be
not
under
here.
FEMA.
Well, John's not here, I wonder how, when they come up with a quote or an estimate for streets and curbs, you know, well in advance of the project, they seem to be able
Yeah.
to fill in those
They
gaps.
have numbers.
I just wondered where they get those numbers. 'Cause that would be
There
something.
are square foot costs and lineal foot costs, and
When they put something out for bid and they have their specification sheet, they assume all these costs, right down to the backhoe operator, and they know those somehow, that must be published somewhere.
Yeah, they have pretty much general contractor rates and they also have union rates and stuff if it's a union job.
I don't know if you want to see if John can help fill in some of the stuff, or just the going rate. For your public works, you know their hourly rate.
Yeah.
You pay it, so that's easy.
that's what I think
Okay.
your your employees, I would think your secretary and treasurer could give you a good number right there. I think it'd be, hey, somebody pull the FEMA rates, somebody call a rental place or two and find out what a backhoe, a skid loader, and a dump truck rents for. Mower and operator, line trimmer, chainsaw and operator, it's not too difficult to take your labor rate and just tack $5 onto that,
And our new lawnmower costs almost as much as a skid loader did. So, Yeah, the new, Ferris. It was like 16 grand or something.
So, let me ask some questions, and Eric, if I'm stealing his thunder, I'm sorry. I understand why you're trying to adopt the fees so that there is a direct correlation to what you're being charged on the other side of a particular transaction. So if you get charged with zoning permit, you wanna recover that right from the applicant, right? How would that work? What's the procedure? Do you bill them? Like if they have, I had this question before, if somebody has a question about zoning and they want a written opinion, do you say prepay that, or we have your opinion ready, you need to come to the office and give us the $40 and we'll turn it over to you? How does that work?
You can't charge it up front.
So what do you, how does it work in reality then?
Well, then the way you do it is they request it, you provide it, and then they need to pay for it before you send it across the
Release it.
window.
Yeah, before you release it.
And now, understand,
And if they don't ever get a zoning permit, then what, are you gonna lien their property for it, or?
well, they won't get the
But what if
opinion.
they get an opinion and they don't like the opinion, so they're not gonna go ahead with the project because it costs too much?
Well, they've already, to get the opinion, then they have to pay for the opinion.
Yeah,
Again,
pay for it when they pick it up.
Okay, well, that's for a written opinion, but you also have in here where it's timing opinion, talking to them.
Is there
The written opinion is a little bit different than, there's a written opinion, there's an on-site consultation. You have the ability to call and ask questions without incurring costs.
Well, that's part of the discussion.
Yeah, so to me, there's benefit as a builder, there's benefit to both the written opinion and the on-site consultation. I can imagine scenarios myself where working with a customer to design a project, either of those would be of benefit. Because I want answers that I can rely on. I'm gonna spend money designing a project, I want answers I can rely on. It's worth $40 to do that.
Well, I have some additional thoughts on this. Now, as I recall, when I first came on council and the zoning officer left, we were saving the borough $9,000 a year in her salary at the time. And the discussion was, okay, so we're $9,000 lighter in the budget area. So we were gonna take a year and we were gonna offset